Welcome everyone to the Sports World Talk Show. Tonight's guest is Rushia Brown. It's going to be a slightly shorter episode, but let's get started. How you doing tonight, Rushia?
I'm great. How are you today?
I'm good too. Glad to have you on. A little bit of a
Awesome.
last minute.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's been a while. Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's get started with a little bit about yourself. So why don't you let us know what sport did you play?
I am a basketball player. And because I'm seated, you might not know that right off the rip, but if you saw me in person, standing at 6'2", a lot of people, that's their first guess, even though I did a lot of different things in high school. But basketball was the sport I chose to go professional in.
Yeah, it's either gonna be either that or basketball or that or volleyball. People would guess probably.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I did that as well. So, yes.
So why don't you let us hear a little bit of your testimony and how you came to know the Lord?
I have always been amidst people of faith and my family. I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, and my mom's side of the family was Jehovah's Witnesses, and my dad's side of the family was staunch Southern Baptist. And so I've always had the Lord in my life, but it really took a tragedy, I would say, for me to build my own personal relationship. I was a freshman in high school when my father passed away from cancer. And though I had been around the church for a long time and understood that, God was supposed to be a healer and a saver and just all these other things, just the mindset I had as a child, it wasn't until my father passed away that I ended up building my own personal relationship because I started to get into some trouble after my father died. I entered a space of rebellion, just really essentially being depressed and not knowing what my life was supposed to mean and who I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to do. And I started experimenting with all types of things that got me in trouble. So I remember my best friend's mom saying, Rusha, God has something in store for you, but you have to, you know, turn your back on this world and the way that you're living, all the things that I've been doing. And I just literally one night, I remember just falling to my knees and crying because I've been so depressed and just tired of getting in trouble, tired of being, something other than what I knew I was called to be. And I just asked the Lord, I said, Lord, if you have something for me, please, help me out of this situation. Help me to do things differently. Help me to see things differently. Help me to, just remove the pain from my heart. And, I just started a different journey, just trying to build my personal relationship with Christ. And that's how it all started for me.
So why don't you let us know also how you got into playing basketball? Because I think your story is a little bit unique when it comes to professional athletes.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, because my father passed away when I was a freshman, I didn't play organized basketball until I was a sophomore in high school. And at that time, I just wanted to get good enough to be able to get a college scholarship somewhere so I can get an education and get me a good job. My family didn't have much. So I knew if I was going to go to college, it was going to have to come through gaining an athletic scholarship. So I played in the 10th grade, and by the end of my high school career, I was one of the top two student athletes in the state of South Carolina as far as women's basketball. And I got a chance to choose the school I wanted to go to. And when I went, I chose Furman after I had previously committed to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I didn't want to go that far. So I stayed in South Carolina. I went to Furman University and had a stellar career. Just did really well there academically as well as athletically. And the end of my senior year, my coach calls me in the office and tells me, Rusha, I got a call from an agent. They want to talk to you about possibly playing overseas because at the time there was no WNBA. It was primarily just playing internationally. So that had not been an aspiration for me. As I mentioned, I just wanted to get my free scholarship, get my education, and go get me a job. And when I found myself in a position to have an option to go overseas and play, I was elated. I was so excited because I'd never even envisioned a chance to play professionally overseas. And I ended up doing that, and it led me to an incredible career in which I played internationally for 10 years and the WNBA for 7. And moving into playing overseas, we would play overseas in the winter, which would be September, October through April or May. And it was good. I'd come home and have my summers. But in 1996, long time ago, I know, in 1996, following the Summer Olympics, the NBA announced that they were going to start a WNBA, the league here for women that was affiliated with the NBA. And so I was extremely excited. I was playing overseas in France at the time. So I talked to my agent and told her, I was super interested in being a part of this organization. I wanted to make sure that I got a chance to come home and play in front of my friends and family because I've been overseas playing. And internationally, your mom or your siblings may come to visit you, but your friends and your family don't get a chance to come. So nobody was seeing me play, even though I was playing professionally and I loved it. It's not something that I got a chance to do in front of my friends and family. So when the WNBA started, this is the thing that I was really excited about. I wanted to be a part of what was deemed the best and most competitive league in the world. So I was not drafted. I was not a free agent. I actually went to Charlotte from Atlanta and tried out for the team because in the first year of the WNBA, what they did was allow for each of the franchises to host an open tryout because they, marketing purposes, they wanted people to be excited about the league coming into their city. And so, the more people you have from local with the excitement, the easier it is to get fans in the seats. So I drove from Atlanta to Charlotte, tried out for the team, walked into the gym, 250 women trying out for 2 spots. Absolutely crazy. And so, I made it all the way down to the last 4 and I got cut. And that was a really trying time because from the time that I had started playing, I'd never been cut before. So that was just a place that was very different for me. So I went home and I talked to my family and I was really upset. And my mom was like, well, if you think you're good enough to play, then I think you need to try again. So the following weekend, my brother and I drove to Cleveland, Ohio to try out again. Same thing, 250 women trying out for 2 spots. And it was just as crazy the second time as it was the first. And I was fortunate enough to make it again to the Final Four. And this time I was invited by the coach to be a part of the practice team, which meant I would come to practice twice a day, work out with the team, but when it was time for the games, I would have to sit in the stands. When they went on the road, I would not travel. I would literally be just a practice player. And that wasn't exactly what I'd come for. However, I knew all I needed was my foot in the door and that I was willing to work really hard. And, if that was all that was there for me, then that would be it. But I just felt like there was so much more. And so we had 3.5 weeks of training camp. I worked really hard. And at the end of training camp, coach called me in her office and said, listen, Rushia, you've had a great training camp and I'm going to move you from the practice roster to the regular roster. So now I was on the team. So I was super excited. I told my, got a chance to share with my mom and my family that, my hard work had paid off. And I was on the roster. So it was just a great experience because not only had I been introduced to the game at a later age, but I just learned that, my hard work put me into a cycle of working hard, getting results, getting better, working hard, getting results, getting better. And then not only did I recognize it, but everybody else recognized it. So it was really important for me to know that I could make that happen. And it was a dream come true for me.
That's such a great story, and it seems like you overcame a lot in your time playing basketball. And I actually have a really good question from the audience here, and they're asking, what was your hardest internal battle or struggle, and how did you overcome it?
I think like a lot of people who make great leaps and bounds in their lives, I had a bit of the imposter syndrome. Like I didn't know if I was good enough just based on the fact, well, I didn't start playing until I was in the 10th grade. And so when I shared that story, people would be like, what? Oh my God, you didn't start playing until you were in the 10th grade? And I was like, yeah, everybody else has started playing the fourth, fifth, even second grade. So I felt like maybe I wasn't going to be good enough. But one part of me felt insecure, and another part of me felt like I was willing to do the work. And that pops up in my life a number of times, just whenever I am stepping outside of my comfort zone to do other things. I often feel like, well, maybe I'm not meant for this, or maybe I'm not good enough. But that's when, I turn my life to just the prayer and understanding and believing that whatever I'm called to is for me, and I don't have to worry about how it's going to happen and who's going to make it happen. I just have to just be obedient and do the work. So I just know that that's something that I dealt with, imposter syndrome, even transitioning from basketball to corporate America. Just moving into that space, everybody saw me as an athlete, but I had to make sure that I put myself in a position to be a businesswoman. So I did some things to, build my confidence, but I also had to understand that I couldn't allow myself to just be in the box that other people had me in. So I would say imposter syndrome.
That's that's probably really encouraging for some people to hear, because you played at the highest level of your sport, and the fact that you still went through that. I think a lot of people struggle with imposter syndrome. It's probably really encouraging to hear that someone like you also struggled through that and how you overcame that. And so, where did your faith come into play in that? Did your faith in Christ help you with that at all, or um, was there any change in your life because of that?
No, absolutely. I do believe. And every time that I come up against a challenge, that is the thing that I lean on the most is my faith, and just understanding that I'm called to something bigger than who I am. Like you look at my story, I didn't pick up a ball till the 10th grade, but it was like there was a path laid out before me that had nothing to do with me. And especially moving into the space of playing professionally, like this is not a typical story. So I've always known it was bigger than me. And just the fact that I could rest assured that the wheels were in motion because God had a plan and a call on my life. So I just had to get out of the way. I had to still do the work, but I had to get out of the way as far as my imposter syndrome, the negativity of feeling inadequate, those things. I just knew it was never about me. And even today, as I thought basketball was a big thing that God was placing in my life, I've learned now that it was just a platform to do even more, to impact lives, to share my story, to encourage and motivate people to take a different walk and understand that none of us are perfect. So I love using my personal life, myself as a testimony, because when I tell the story, people are engaged and so many people can connect. So I've always known that it's been bigger than me.
So, what advice would you have for student athletes, pursuing athletics as a career? What advice would you have for them to keep their mind focused on Christ in a career that can be very self-focused?
I just think it's really important to understand who you are and whose you are, and that at any moment, this game can be taken away from you. But the impact that you can have on lives is about Christ and doing his work and just being a person that people see a reflection of Christ in. I have so many times had opportunities to do incredible things with my sisterhood and just fans and all those type of things. And I know that's not, Rushia doesn't have a hand in that. And I think, my faith has always given me an opportunity to just laugh at myself because I know I'm not powerful at all. I know it's not about me. And just every situation I go into, I'm just thinking, how can I shine a light that's bigger than myself and allow for the platform to be used to impact the lives of others?
So, one of the things you mentioned about your testimony is that you grew up in a home with two very different denominations, and that uh, God was always central in your life. But what was it like? What kind of perspective did it give you growing up with two very distinctly different denominations influencing your life?
Yeah, there was such a stark contrast between the two denominations. But the one thing that was consistent was the love for Christ. And it just taught me that everybody's relationship is different. And so I couldn't depend on my mother's relationship or my father's relationship or my grandma's relationship or my uncle's relationship. I had to build my own. And as I learned more about both of the relationships, both of the religions, I literally just put myself in a position to choose something that fit me. And it wasn't so much about the denomination, but finding me a safe place where I felt I would be taught and spiritually fed and be around people who didn't just talk the talk, but walk the walk, and that they were doing the right things as well as saying them. So once again, like I think that the most important part was really just trying to build my own relationship because both of them to me were extreme. I saw some good and some bad in both of them, but I took the pieces from both parts and just figured out how to build my own relationship.
There's a saying that I really like: God doesn't have grandchildren. And I think that definitely reflects that, that you have to make your relationship with God your own, and you have to make the decision for yourself. And I have another audience question here. What is your favorite Bible passage?
You know, it depends on what stage I'm in my life. There are a couple. Where am I right now? Just looking at. Let's see, what is the last one that I've been reading now? I'll look because I have all my scriptures put right here in my I put it right here. My last Bible studies. Let's look at it. Then I got my glasses on and still can't see. Let's see. Oh no, that's not the right one. My Bible studies. I was trying to find what we've been studying. And I think the last one that we were looking at was just really about being true to Christ and understanding that we're his children. Let's see. Because we've been doing a lot of work on mental health. And so with 1 Peter 5:7, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. We just talked about how anxiety and depression stems from worrying about things, attaching yourselves to things from the past, and how anxiety is attaching yourself to things in the future. So that's what we did with our last Bible study, and just really looking at how the verses could help us. And I had it like in 3 different notes right here, but I think that's really important because at different phases of our lives, like different verses will stand out. But this one now with mental health and just the stress of having been in the house for a year and not being able to engage and interact with people the way that we normally do is one of the ones. It's been tough for everybody. So just looking at that one is important.
Mental health is a big issue right now, and I think the church is talking about it more than it ever has in probably the church's, at least the American church's history. And I think that it's great that Christians are starting to open up more about that with their own feelings. I feel like anxiety and depression, we kind of feel like as Christians we're not allowed to feel those emotions, but that's just not the case. So what advice would you have for someone, both for Christians who are dealing with depression and anxiety, but also for maybe people who aren't believers, and how Christ can help them in that way?
It's crazy because I think, like you mentioned, so many of us think that we are not allowed to be in that space, but we are all humans, and there are times when our bodies are taken over by something stronger than us, and we have to be faithful and we have to give ourselves over to the Lord so that he can have the control that is necessary to bring us back to a healthy space. But we have to acknowledge it first. And I think a lot of times people are in denial. I read something the other day that says you never healed because you kept pretending that you weren't hurt. And I think we have to first be honest with the feelings, honest about the feelings that we're having and about how it's impacting our lives personally, professionally, athletically, spiritually, emotionally. because the longer we try and hide it, the more it nestles under us and gives us a more difficult way to deal with it. But I think just acknowledging that we have these hurts and pains and speaking to someone in a safe space where we can talk about it and knowing that it's okay because nobody is perfect. If nothing else, it's because we're all sinners. There's something in us that's not perfect. So don't try and put ourselves in a position where we have to fix it ourselves because that's not what it's about. We have to lean on the Lord and wait for him to make sure that we're in a position and have the right people around us that'll help us to feel better and to develop and grow.
Yeah, I think that's always been a problem with when we talk about, you know, coming to Christ, especially, that we feel like we have to clean ourselves up before, we come to Christ and before we uh, ask for his aid and his salvation. But people don't realize that that is what Christ came to do. He came to wash us. He came to take our burdens, not to lead us after we've removed our own burdens, because we literally can't. That's the power of the Holy Spirit. And how have you seen in the last year Christ working in your life and the people's lives around you?
It's been amazing because I know this has been such a terrible time for so many people. And I just see in my own family, there has been time for us to sit and be still and to draw even closer in our relationship. Because before, even myself, I know I worked so much that I was always gone, always traveling, but I've had time to do better and spend time more in the Word and even working with my daughter and her personal, helping her develop her own personal relationship and different things with my family. So the time that I thought I needed to be out, I actually benefited from being at home and being quiet and still and studying and meditating and praying. So it has definitely given me time, like in the space, you can look at it as something negative or positive. And I just choose to look at the positive because I know in all things there's a challenge and maybe obstacles, but you can always get something good from them. So this has been, for my family, how this has benefited us because we just try to look at the positive side. We're safe, we're healthy, and how do we come out of this stronger?
I think that right now is a good time for Christians to ready themselves, because I think people are, after everything that went through and just the lack of security we've had in our lives over the last year, I think that people are ready for some stability and some security. And I think it's become very clear that we're not going to find that in, our world or our friends or the media or our government. That Christ can bring a security that no one else can. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
Christians need to be prepared. They need to be ready to help people in that way and show the love of Christ.
Mm-hmm. And I know you, and just really thinking about, like you were mentioning, when we talked about sinners and just knowing that, even Jesus called the sinners, not so much the righteous. And I think a lot of times when we talk about depression, people think, well, I'm not of Christ because I'm not like doing everything that I need to, or we've got to come to him a certain way. That is what he does. He cleanses us. So it's not about coming, because why would we need him if we were already perfect? We wouldn't. And I think a lot of times we just feel bad about the relationship or the lack thereof that we have. And people just don't want to move forward in that. But I think just understanding, like Jesus worked with some of the most, he had one that cussed, somebody that cut off somebody's ear. Like everybody has done something. But even in knowing that your sins can be washed away and you can still serve and walk in the light of the Christ.
Yeah, and I'm reminded of the parable of the man who was forgiven much and the man who was forgiven little. And or that's actually, that wording makes me think
Given.
I'm thinking of a different parable, because there's two parables about being forgiven much. But the man who was forgiven the great debt, who then goes out and beats up the guy who owes him a much smaller debt. And it just reminds me of that, because even as Christians, we can have a tendency to try and earn our salvation after the fact. The man who was forgiven much was forgiven a lifetime debt. And he went and beat up someone who owed him a day's wages. And because he was still trying to pay back the debt that he had been forgiven. I think that could just lead
Mm-hmm.
Christians down such an unhealthy road, because when we're so focused on our own sin and things that have already been forgiven, we forget the mission of spreading the love of Christ.
hmm hmm and that's so important because so many times, and it's easier to see the sins of others. You know, like when you feel like you've not done things right, you will look to your left or your right and see something that somebody else has done. And it's easier, you know, to see the stick in their eye than the big old piece of wood in our own. So just that vulnerability and allowing yourself to be accountable for our own actions and not place, you know, the blame and acknowledge so much the sin of others, because we're all working towards being a better person. And I'm not trying to be better than you or better than this person, but just being better than I was yesterday. And I think just those relationships and the mindset is really important because we're all sinners. None of us is perfect. And we just have to figure out how to just work on building a better and healthier relationship every day. And then just moving forward so that people can see the changes in our lives and see what I was versus what I am, and be encouraged to do some of the things that I've done instead of just saying one thing and doing something else.
Yeah, I know that early on in my walk, I got into a lot of trouble from trying to be like other Christians or trying to be better than other Christians when I took my eyes off the goal of trying to be like Christ
Mm,
and focusing on my personal relationship. And the love of Christ is such an interesting kind of love because he loved us, he died on the cross for us and saved us. And then when he asks us to love him, the ways that we love him are by loving others. Even in
mhm,
receiving love, he is selfless and desires us to love others in the way he loved us. And that's how we show our love for him. And
mhm,
so
mhm.
it's really important for Christians to remember that your relationship with Christ should be focused on being like him, not being like other people.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you definitely want to make sure that people see Christ in you. Like, so your relationship with Christ should be reflected in the way that, like you mentioned, how you handle other people. And there's so many people that are struggling because they have run into Christians that make them feel less than worthy because they haven't gotten to a certain point yet. And if you're already beating yourself up, you definitely don't want to be in a situation where somebody else is coming down hard on you as opposed to encouraging and lifting you up. And as I do, um, sharing my own personal struggles. And so it's easier to have somebody be drawn to you when they don't believe that you're perfect. Yep, I struggle just like everybody else. So those are things that I work on, but yet and still I remain in my faith and I continue to work harder. And I know that, you know, I'm being judged for the work that I'm doing. And that's what I focus on. And so I just feel like a lot of people give up on themselves because they are holding themselves to a standard that's unrealistic, even by God's standards.
Definitely. So moving back to your testimony, um, you mentioned that you went and played basketball overseas, which must have been an amazing experience. So I always think of basketball as like a very American sport. I very rarely think of it like being really popular over in other countries. But what was it like being a believer in those other countries? What was it like trying to find community in a place so different from your own home?
You know, that essentially was the most difficult part because once I had established my relationship, I always had a church home or a Bible study group or somebody that I could learn with and share with. But when you go over to a different country and you potentially can't even find somebody who speaks your language, then your challenges are incredible. But one of the things that I did, because when you go overseas and play, you have at least two Americans on your team. So you can have two Americans on your team. And hopefully, if you're in a good situation, the other person is a believer. If not, then you know maybe you can talk to them about growing their faith and increasing their walk. But there have been times where I was by myself, so I would have my own Bible studies with myself. And once at a certain point, myself and another one of my sisterhood, Jenny, we started agape, which was agape and play together. So it was a Bible study group for the WNBA sisterhood who was playing overseas. So we had it at two different times a week. So people in one area can get on and somebody in another area. So it was about creating an opportunity too. Agape 97 was the name of the group. And then I also, when I was in Spain, I got a chance to meet two young ladies who were Mormons. And it was really just about sharing the word and reading the Bible and having someone in English to speak with. So they weren't trying to force anything on me, but we just shared a love for Christ and overlooked whatever religion was. So we just kept talking and we would share and do a little Bible study together. And it just continued on that way. So whenever I could, I found someone and they would introduce me to people in different cities. And I just continued to maintain my own relationship. But that was also a way for me to work on the language of the native country because I speak Spanish, Italian, and some French. And it was fun to even converse and share the word with my teammates.
So you played overseas and then you came over and played for the WNBA. What was it like pioneering a whole new league of professional sports?
You know, the WNBA was an absolute incredible situation. And we are now in the 25th, this is the 25th anniversary. So the WNBA has been in existence for 25 years. And I'm so proud to have been a part of the groundbreaking year and knowing that the women that I stood beside created something that has grown and developed. And the women that are playing now are even more talented. They're bigger, stronger, faster. You know, the coverage is better. And with the use of social media, these young ladies are being able to market themselves. The salaries have increased, but just knowing that I was there and have been close to this league since its inception is really an honor for me because I know it has an opportunity to impact so many lives. And I just know that I was a part of that. So I continue to work knowing that the young ladies that are coming up, generations and generations after us, will have something they can depend on.
That must be amazing to. That must be an amazing feeling to have, this group of women in the WNBA. All of them were born after the NBA was created, most likely, and so it must be nice to see this whole group of young women who got to grow up, with a dream to play professional sports in that way.
It's amazing because, like you mentioned, the league has been here for 25 years. So anybody who's graduated from college now has had the WNBA for their entire lives. And I grew up watching the Lakers and Magic Johnson and the Bulls and Michael Jordan and, Karl Malone with Utah. And there were no true aspirations because as a woman, you want to play, but you can't do the same thing that the men do. So now these young ladies have women that they can model their games after. They have games where they can go and see women playing at the highest level. You have women in the front office, you have women referees. There are just so many women everywhere doing these incredible things. And not only that, you have the support of these incredible men who stand as allies in supporting women's sports. So it's just really been an incredible journey. And I'm just happy to be a part of it because it's really necessary, as I mentioned, for the young ladies coming up behind us. And just the work that we do as alumni of this game, it's about mentoring and raising these young ladies up to teach them how to be, the appropriate student athlete or even professional athlete.
So after you played with the WNBA, where did that take you? What was your career path after you decided to retire from professional sports?
So my retiring from professional sports was random. Like I had just been having like some injuries and I was just tired of always having to do rehab. And then what I should have done was taking a break, but I retired. And when I did, for a while, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I did realize that I had been living overseas for 10 years. I'd been away from my family, and anything that I committed myself to now was going to be something that I loved and not just about money. So what I committed myself to was mentoring, empowering young girls and women. My sisterhood of women in the WNBA, I started the Women's Professional Basketball Alumni Association, which assists with transition for women that have played in the WNBA and internationally. So my whole commitment post-basketball was about doing things that I love and that fed my spirit. So just really helping to empower girls and women has been what I committed to. And I stayed close to the game. I did some work with the NBA. For the last 4 years, I've worked with the WNBA in the front offices. Right now, I'm currently with the LA Sparks. 2 years prior, I was with the Las Vegas Aces. A year before that, I worked at the NBA League office. So I've always stayed close to the game because I love basketball. And like I said, I love empowering youth and my sisterhood. So I just know that there's a calling, and I believe that basketball was just what was leading me to impact these other lives.
So you've been working with Sportswood for a while, but what other platform for the gospel has this career choice given you? Have you been given opportunities to share the gospel with other people doing what you do?
Absolutely. So not only because each of the WNBA teams has chaplains, I've spoken at different pregame. I've even subbed as a chaplain a couple of times. As I mentioned, I have started a Bible study group for the international WNBA players, and even of my own, I have my own nonprofit. And one of the things we're talking about is your relationship with Christ, and just looking at the different things that we do. Your relationship with Christ is really important. So everything that I do, I have it intertwined into the uplifting of other people, because I share my faith in hopes that they would see the impact that it's had on my life and then take it into their own, account and do something for themselves.
So, with all that you've done, what what is your sort of your goal, your inspiration for what you do? Is there something that has propelled you forward, maybe something from your childhood or your career that just propelled you into this career path?
I remember being lost and feeling broken and hearing the positive words of a young lady who had gone to my high school and had moved on to college. And it wasn't so much about her faith, but about believing in yourself and knowing that you can do something bigger and better. And I just believe that I've been given a platform to impact lives. And though basketball was the sport that, gave me this platform, I just feel like the content that I share is really important, and allowing people to understand that you don't have to be perfect. And there's nothing better than, the phrase from Sports World that says we're not born winners or losers, we're born choosers. And it doesn't matter what direction you're going in. All it takes is a commitment to be an about face, and you can change. So it's about making a decision to do better and to be better. And that's one of the things that I like to present to people. So when I have a platform, be it professionally, emotionally, spiritually, athletically, I just always present the opportunity to live their best selves and be Christ-like, and just see how that life works for them and how they can do what's best for them in their future.
That's great. And now we're starting to approach the end of our time. So I want to give you an opportunity to speak directly to the audience and the people listening. Um, what what advice or lesson would you want to leave this group? They took one thing away from this talk. What do you want to leave them with?
I think it's really important that everybody understand that we all have special gifts and talents, and we have the ability to impact this world and to share something incredible. And it's something that only you can do. And it's not the person to your left or the person to your right. It's about you and understanding what your calling is. And so I often share the passion principles and talk about how to be the exception and not the rule. So we know the rule is what everybody will do. But when we talk about the exception, that means going above and beyond. And so the passion principles just speaks to 7 key phrases, 7 key terminologies that are successful. And your P is your perseverance, understanding that you will have challenges, setbacks, and obstacles, but you got to keep moving. You got to figure out how to get back on track and keep moving forward in pursuit of your goals. Your A is your attitude. People work with people that they know and they like. Your attitude is really important because you show people how to treat you just based on how you carry yourself, how you walk into a room, how you engage with people. So know that your attitude has a huge impact as to whether somebody's going to want to support you or not. So you have your perseverance, attitude. Your first S is sacrifice. Now, sacrifice, knowing the difference between what I want to do and what I need to do. Okay? You're going to have to give up something in order to get something else. And just figuring out what those things are. And every day of your life, either your decision is pulling you closer to what you want or closer away from it. And your sacrifices and your actions will tell you which one are your priority. So your second S is setting goals. So when we talk about setting goals, it's understanding what you want to do in this life, be it short term or long term. Writing it down, holding yourself accountable, charting out a path. And a lot of times we think about things and we dream about it, but we don't write it down. And it doesn't become real until we put ink to paper and write it down and then have conversation about it. So share it with some people and map it out. What does it look like? And if there's somebody who's done that, ask them how they get there, because you can build out your own map. Just getting knowledge from somebody else is really important. So we have perseverance, attitude, sacrifice, setting goals. Your I is your inner strength, believing in yourself even when nobody else does. I spoke earlier about the fact that, I didn't pick up the ball till I was in the 10th grade. I went to a small school. Like, all these things could have easily played against me, but I never believed that. And I knew that there was calling on my life and that God was going to use me if I allowed him. And it took me being obedient and doing the work and making sure that I was doing great things. And my life has turned out, I think the way he would have it. And there's just been a number of opportunities for me to do different things, but it's always led me this way. So I think it's really important that we believe in ourselves. And our O is optimism, understanding that life is not what happens to you, but how you respond to it. Okay. We talked about in perseverance how this life is going to throw some stuff at you, but how do you bounce back? So your optimism is about having a positive spin, even when something negative happens, even when something doesn't go that way. As an athlete, we tend to think life is wins and lessons, wins and losses, but now it's about wins and lessons. So if I don't get something that I want, I have to have a positive mindset in order to push myself so that the next time I'm better prepared. So in your N, the last one is never giving up. And that's self-explanatory. You can't quit. So your perseverance, attitude, sacrifice, setting goals, inner strength, optimism, and never giving up. I do believe that there's a calling on each of our lives. There's something spectacular out there that's going to happen, and it has to happen through us, and the world is waiting. So I just encourage everybody to make sure that you are being honest with yourself, sit in your peace and have some quiet time and listen in your talk with Christ and see what he's calling you to do, and be bold and obedient.
Thank you so much for taking your time out of your day, Rushia. I know it's last minute and you subbed in for us, and I'm just really grateful for that. And it's always great time having you on. And so before we get going, I just want to let everyone know, we talked a lot about depression and anxiety and all of those mental health issues. And if you want any help with anything like that, or you want to know more about Christ, or you want to know anything more about what we talked about tonight, you can email us at mydecision@sportsworld.org, and we will get back to you as soon as possible with advice and encouragement. But if you're doing something a little bit more dire and immediate, we also have a 24/7 crisis text line where you can text the word choice to 494949 and receive some immediate trained help from counselors who are ready to talk to you 24/7 hours a day, or 24/7. I just keep saying the wrong thing. 24 hours, 7 days a week. There we go. I finally got it. And then finally, we have a bunch of social media sites that you can follow us on. YouTube, where you can watch this live stream again tomorrow. It'll be trimmed down and edited and nice and clean for you to watch and listen to Rushia's advice if you missed any of it. And then we also have an Instagram and a Twitter that you can follow us on. And if you're not watching on TikTok, then you can follow us on TikTok as well. I just want to thank you again, Rushia, for taking the time, and have a wonderful night.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.